go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for coming to the Couplet Poetry Festival. I'm Ross White from Bull City Press, and want to thank Gwynfar and Old Books for having the festival, which is just awesome. So before you guys leave here, buy a lot of books. We've got 3 readers today, and then there are events all throughout the rest of the day, so feel free to stick around as long as you like. Our first reader today is Sarah Huner. Sarah just graduated with an MFA from Boston University, and this fall was the Robert Pinsky Travel Fellow. Is that right? Okay, see, I thought
Not the A.
Okay. Well, she was the rest were just other Robert Pinsky Travel Fellows. And she has poems forthcoming in the 4-way review. So please welcome Sarah Huner.
I have my phone, but I'm not texting anyone. I'm just timing myself. So don't be distracted by that. I am going to read all poems that I wrote during the fellowship, and they are sort of in a logical order. And if anyone speaks Hebrew, I'm sorry for my pronunciation. There are 2 Hebrew words in this poem. Eating fruit at night. I didn't wear a watch that week. I measured time by shadow and didn't measure when the sun went down. I caught you writing on my arm with your finger. My name is simpler in your language, traced lightly by your left hand. It seems strange I did not know before which hand you used to write. When the man blessed us in Jerusalem, we held out opposite wrists for the red string. Now we are a mirror. We understand everything we say except the names of fruit. I'd never eaten a fasimon, so we looked it up. Persimmon, the lotus of Odysseus. You showed me how to hold it, see if it gives, right. Every second slice was mine, the flesh shining, shot through, with fibers tasting like the moon. You taught me home, Beat. When the sun was down, I measured in fruit and wrote with shadows. My name grows long again. The hands of my watch are moving. And that also, though it was free verse, was in couplets, so in honor of the festival. The only thing you need to know about this poem is Stoja is a beach near Pula, which is on the coast of Croatia. So it's the Adriatic Sea. Cliff jumping at Stoja. I remember when you were in love with caves, hollows sloping roundly like the cavities of the body. Within bone, a brittleness hanging in the air where Ossian once held marrow. In this same way, stone holds water here. We found a cliff to jump from into the cold September sea. Waves burrow into a cave under us, past the coastline, its dark hole reaching backward as if searching. I imagine a picture taken of a human body in midair to play at flying. Below, the water shadowed to almost black. I read once that drowning is different in the ocean, something about salt and blood in the lungs. The wind blows cold bumps onto your arms. 100 birds descend between the gray clouds and horizon, banking against wind, and I feel them not breathe inside my chest as we wait for the right moment to step off. And there are 2 Zagreb poems, and they will be back to back, and Zagreb is the capital of Croatia, and that's where I spent most of my time. I was there for 2 months and some change. And it's a really cool old city. You can sort of see in the buildings all the different eras that have passed, and the communist era is still pretty present architecturally, but also some really cool Art Nouveau stuff that's in slight disrepair, but still beautiful. Zagreb, October. The air is heavy with rain. It might break at any moment, but it would not be a hard break, like holding your breath when not underwater. If If you are standing without shelter, your clothing won't darken and cling to your body. Instead, a freshness of pavement, everything dotting softly. It's cool enough for the garbage bins to hide their scent under the sweetness of fall leaves rotting in the park. At home, when I carry tea to my desk, the label twirls like a single maple seed pinwheeling downward. Their one wing spins the pod, slowing the fall. Pitch, the distance a propeller moves in one theoretical revolution. Time in the air is not dissembling. This way, the wind can send them further. Gravity, their only tether. Zagreb, November. I find graffiti again and again on different walls. A leitmotif, not a landmark. Giraffe people with swirling eyes, initials added together inside hearts, a rabbit as tall as me, smoking a blunt between neighborhood slogans in broken English. Everywhere, another language for bravado, and more people I don't know. Sometimes, beyond black tramline cables, I can spot the motionless, gridded cranes, but I judge direction by where the mountain is, or how the shadows fall after noon. On the paths I walk daily, I know where puddles form in rain. And this is my last poem, and it has an epigraph that is Louise Glick, and the epigraph is, "We had each of us a set of wishes." Also, the title is Sutra, and that means tomorrow in Croatian, as well as the sort of mantra-esque meaning of some sort of bit of wisdom where you repeat to yourself. Sutra. I learned today to make the future, adding a word to talk of what has not yet happened. We will pick strawberries tomorrow. I will see you soon. In this language, the future is made of want. The same word for wishing on a coin, or walking with you near that same pond next year. But there must be other ways to say wish. I don't know yet. Does tomorrow look different from where you are? We're standing side by side. The weather has turned, and it will rain. This is a certainty. At first, I thought this new future was full of the kind of zeal I envy, thirst for new air, for the next sun. But it could be another way, always trying to want what will be. I try to make plans. My map holds the way I've come. It can only be read backwards. It leads to home, then ends. Thanks.
Whenever you're the MC of an event, but you're also a reader, you have this sort of weird thing. You're like, do I go through my own formal bio the way I'm going to do for our other readers and talk about publications? So what I've done is I've settled on reading you a poem called Biographical Note. Ross White was born in a Quonset hut and has since maintained an almost encyclopedic knowledge of Quonset huts. If you do not know what a Quonset hut is, Ross White cannot and will not ever respect you, though he will take a moment to explain to you that a Quonset hut is a corrugated metal building that looks like an oversized can of tomatoes, labelless and half buried, or looks like a particularly comfortable sleeping bag, or like an odd metal burrito. Ross White's encyclopedic knowledge extends to other areas, like the mating habits of lightning bugs, the mating habits of jellyfish, the mating habits of marmosets, the mating habits of elk, and the Wikipedia page for the Monty Hall problem. When Ross White turns off the lamp by his bedside table, he dreams very realistic dreams of being a character in Moby Dick. Not a major character, a minor midshipman, or the guy who helped the cook. And Ross White, too, is sunk when Captain Ahab persists beyond reason, even beyond madness, in his pursuit of the white whale, about whose mating habits Ross White knows a surprising amount. So I think think that pretty much takes care of all of my formal qualifications for reading today. I'm going to read a poem from Another and Another. This is an anthology from the Grind Daily Writing Series that Bull City Press did a couple of years ago, and we've got copies over here. It's 47 terrific poets, some emerging, some since emerged, I guess. This is called Modern Problems. This was, I think, the first sonnet I ever published that people would read it and be like, oh wait, that was a sonnet? And I was like, take that. Modern problems. The problem with modern fiction is flora. It's quite literary to pepper the ground with cedar, jasmine, jacaranda, choke cherry, all willy-nilly without respect to climate. The problem with now is that the past is a pickaxe, an archaeologist with a furrowed brow, chiseling around the edges of what was meant to remain a secret. The problem with beaches is erosion. Made of granite, they would not be sloughing off into the ocean, which incidentally is warming, and that is the problem with it, though I could name 2 or 3. The problem with tuna salad is mayonnaise. The problem with art is proving its problematic value. The problem with Chopin is Mozart, and the problem with Dizzy Gillespie is Wynton Marsalis, and the problem with everything that has come since is everything that came before. The problem with dying is everyone does it in their own time, and no one picks their own mahogany coffin. And I've got 7 poems for you. Those first 2 were sort of hanging out. The rest of the poems are from a collection called How We Came Upon the Colony. That's coming out from Unicorn Books in August. So I'll be Terry's pressmate. Pretty excited about that.
Not as excited as me.
We could fight about that. And so How We Came Upon the Colony is, it's about a fictional colony, but in some ways it's a reimagining of American history. Maybe if we hadn't screwed it up completely. So pretty much we did everything exactly the same until the Reagan years. No, I think we probably screwed it up before that. This is called A History of Deaths in Our New Colony, complete to 1656. Duelist fought with pitchfork, 1. Duelist fought with frying pan, 1. Duelist lovesick upon a stray flung jug, 1. Others crossed in love, 9. Rascals caught thieving, hanged, 3. Rascals presumed thieving, hanged, 2. Ruffians presumed thieving, hanged, 5. Old age, nary a death. Frightful cold in church, 8. Drowned on suspicion of witchcraft, 2. Bewitched, 6. Born with golden caul, choked, 1. Affrighted by the devil child, 3. Lured to the wood by fairies, 2. A great sneeze, 3. So, and that poem actually was taken. Some of those are real. I found a list of deaths in an Irish town for the year 1556 or 1656, and so I maybe added 1 or 2 of those. Those might not be actual ways to die. Duelist with a frying pan. That one's real. That one happened in Ireland in 1656. This is this. Well, I'm just going to read this one. Y'all will know everything you need to know. Upon establishing the colony, we likened it to paradise. We found gold in the river silt. We found beautiful iron in the ore. The oily ink we made from turpentine, walnut, and soot took beautifully to vellum. The vellum rolled beautifully into scrolls. We sent the scrolls across oceans to report on the condition of flora and fauna. It hardly seemed overstatement to borrow language from the Bible. Did we not have the vast array of stars which had guided us here? Did we not have trees that were pleasing to the eye, and good for food. But Eden, the paradise upon which all paradise might have been conceived, was sparsely described. A few rivers, aromatic resins, minerals whose plenty was dwarfed by copper, opal, silver, and sapphire, which seemed to spring from our ground. We found the few verses in Genesis wanting. So we broke with God's chroniclers and began recording all that true paradise might use to tempt a man. And eventually we began to record those temptations. We took note of the bloodshed, the salt and lime spread on the soil, how man, like meat, inevitably spoils. I write today to ask you to burn the vellum. I have laid torch to the libraries we built. The description of paradise is a trifle before the inexorable description of our expulsion from it. And so that's a poem sort of early in the imagined colony's history. So the settlers have arrived there and realized, oh man, we're already screwing this up. This is the colony in present day, which may actually sound like the economic crisis that started in 2008. But probably there are no parallels. Downturn. What's gone remains gone. When the library at Alexandria burned, scroll lit scroll, whole languages died there. The Colossus at Rhodes, felled by earthquake, was eventually disassembled under the orders of the Caliph, carted off by camel, and smelted like scrap. Pliny once wrote that the lankiest citizens of Rhodes could barely wrap their arms around the fallen giant's thumb. And now there is nothing here but the wide arc of cratered land. It'll take decades for the foliage to find its way back, and what grows here on battered ground, ground which was fused to glass in places, will wrestle its green from the gray. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, a distance Alexander might have marched in 17 days, or a comet might pass in about 2.5 minutes, 50 kids are sitting in a classroom, a few on the floor. The teachers' union says it'll take decades to unlearn what this damage has harvested, likening the cuts to a crater. They sound the alarm of the burning library, full of precious things, but what's gone is gone. There is a theory of generations the business world uses to describe the relentless pessimism older workers feel about how dumb the younger workers are. Sour grapes, says the younger generation, but the truth is something akin to ferns. Sometimes growth is inevitable, even without water, even without sunlight. They managed to muddle through the Great Gatsby. They'll manage to muddle through the market survival kits every good capitalist eventually has to make for himself. They'll muddle through the whiskey and rye after 5. What's gone is what the business world terms unflappability, stick-to-itiveness. What anyone else would term the sense that you could spit watermelon seeds in the backyard and wake up the next morning to those thick vines. Concrete spreads, relentless as ivy, across the imagination. The most recent Colossus fell during the tremors, and we kept the pieces for a while, but eventually we couldn't marvel at them without feeling some sorrow, so we came with carts, and we melted those down too. This poem is, so the first time you fall in love, great. The second time you fall in love, you totally screw it up. After that, you're probably okay, but the second person that you're with, you're horrible for them, right? You know this? Right? So this is a poem to my poor second victim. Second love. I took you nowhere, still shell-shocked from the carpet bombing at the end of first love, still in awe of how quick the turn from roses to reproach, the hollowing out. For third love, I laid shingles on rooftops, I moved across country in a semi-stolen camper. I skinny-dipped in quarries in each of the western states. For fourth love, I married. But all you got was codependence and occasional chrysanthemums. I promise I was trying, but the itinerary was blank. First love I took to magnificent bridges where we dangled our feet and talked about how far the drop would be. Third love I steered towards the stone cities, the curious mausoleums we could not wait to explore, full of bones, tarnished silver. Fourth love I flew to villas in green mountains, to Parisian avenues, great museums. Second love I delivered you to the desert. I had to be sure I wouldn't remember any of the landmarks. And this is my last poem. It has a Latin title, which is Quae nocent saepe docent, which means what hurts also teaches. But I've actually encountered it in the back of a comic book, which is where I encountered like 98% of my culture. And it was a comic book about the devil, and the writer had actually translated it into a statement that I thought was a little bit more elegant, which was pain is the great teacher, which I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And you'll hear that come back. Quae nocent saepe docent. My bow legs crossed, I sat before someone I thought the great teacher. His whole body a fist, he said, pain is the great teacher. As sun rejects moon, as water rejects fire, one must first reject a notion, if one is ever to embrace it. The flower of denial, perhaps, the great teacher? I wandered the museums of terracotta soldiers and the mansions of silence. I asked the Ronin where I might find the great teacher. I sent my dream self to the rounded hovels at the edge of imagination. I asked all the creatures in the dreaming where I might find the great teacher. I learned to see the world through the eye of a needle, to shape sticks, to sing morning songs. I thought myself the envy of the great teacher. But stone grew around my feet and held me fast as I became stone. Then I believed for some years that humility was the great teacher. In autumn evening, the outline of a woman broke the purple horizon. She looked at me with such pity and asked if I had found the great teacher. My ruin forgotten, I thawed. I built us a canoe. I painted figurines of Ronin as gifts. Her delight was rose petal. I abandoned my search for the great teacher. One cannot know incompletion until completed. Newly in love, what need had I for the counsel of the great teacher? It never occurred to me that I might undress my beloved and discover the white blooms of scar across her back, shadows of the great teacher. Thanks. Our final reader today is here from Greensboro. Terry L. Kennedy is the author of New River Breakdown, which we also have over on the table. It's from Unicorn Press. It just came out this year. And it looks like Terry has brought 4 of the 5 variant covers. So if you're like a comic book nerd like me, you will want to buy all of the covers. So you should do that. So New River Breakdown is just out. Terry also works with Spring Garden Press and is the editor of Story South, which is an online journal of fiction and poetry, and nonfiction as well. And he works with the Greensboro Review in his role with the MFA program at UNC Greensboro. So please welcome Terry L. Kennedy.
What happened to the fun intro I sent you? I figured I was reading with Ross. I had to have like this big, exciting introduction. But you totally ignored it.
Like, you want me to go read it off my phone?
No, please don't.
I forgot it. I'm sorry.
So I thought I'd read a few poems from New River Breakdown and a couple of new poems. This first poem was published in a great literary journal called Cave Wall that comes out of Greensboro. If you write poetry, I highly encourage you to submit to Cave Wall. It is a beautiful literary magazine. And this poem, like by way of introduction, sort of came out of a conversation that I had with Jack Gilbert and Linda Gregg. And Jack talking about sort of the need, well, his need to sort of like live your life being in the world and traveling the world. And so I kept saying, I like it here. I like it in Greensboro. And he kept going, but have you lived your life? And I kept thinking, yes. Not only I am living my life. So this poem kind of comes out of that conversation. It's called The Known World. How often I feel all I could say has been written already, or you've heard it from folks with enlivening accents or wider teeth than mine. So why should I say anything at all? Sometimes, though, I try to remind myself how that small white boat alone on the smooth blue bay is somehow more meaningful than the untamed meadow of umbrellas and bikinis kissing the edge of the water. Or else, I think to remember how the chef, his kitchen twitching with fish, freshly ground cardamom, cumin, and coriander, still reaches for a finger of salt before releasing his steaming terrines to the table. And that should be enough. Except that I know someone else who's craved your scent, your voice, your mouth before me, and done so beautifully. As soon as I got out of my car today, I saw Ross, and then I said, you invited me to the beach, and like here I am, I'm shivering. I wore a t-shirt, like I'm expecting it to be nice and warm and lovely, and here we are, back in winter again. So, sometimes winter comes when you least expect it. Like a winter day that arrives in June when there's nothing to do but drink black coffee, watch the rain, so too will that thin white inch of memory round your neighbor's corner disappear down the block. Like touching my finger to your lips, so too will the day-long mist sharpen something for us, perhaps our image of how life could be on a different street. St. Francis stands by the bird bath, his arms open to us. If not for the rain, I'd call it a miracle. The wind gusts, obscuring your face. Any thoughts is why we remain so devoted to the return of winter, its forced isolation. That thin white inch. Is it a wound that will never heal? A promise continually broken? My finger breaks the mirrored water of the bird bath, soothes your lips, a healing you desire, but for reasons that are all my own. So this book is called New River Breakdown, and little did I know when I gave this manuscript to Andrew to look at, that I would really begin actually writing some poems that had to do with the New River. This is really one of the only poems in the book that is set on the New River. I'll read some of the newer ones that are actually up there. And I gave this to him at the beginning of the summer, and then at the end of the summer I was like, I gave away the best poem. Like all the other poems really should be in this other book, but maybe that was sort of like my release. It carried me off. So this poem, New River Breakdown, I think like the only information in it that you need to know is if you're not familiar with the New River, it starts in North Carolina and then runs north and up into Virginia and West Virginia, and then I think it maybe intersects with the Ohio or something. So it runs in a direction counter to what you would normally expect with the river. I like to say that because one of the first times I read this poem at a reading, someone came up and they were like, "Rivers don't flow north. I hate to tell you that." It's like, this one does. Just past June, and our old dog is swimming the slow summer waters of this ancient river, both of them gliding with a natural ease that defies their age, the intent and purpose of their separate journeys. Closing my eyes, I can't help but imagine you on your trip, thumb gently stroking your one-way passage across Cook Strait. In peacoat and cap on the back of the boat, you seem to be looking for where you have been as a small pod of dolphins jumps and dives in the wake of your southbound ferry. It's hard to imagine that kind of freedom, happy both in and out of the water. But even those dolphins, their great rounded fins like warm river rocks, are harder and harder to find. Up on the ridge in the hazy distance, a wild goat surveys her bend in the river. If given just one more chance, do you think she would jump in the farmer's old pickup, enjoy the fenced safety of stables and hay? After the ferry has docked in Picton, the strong, brave arms of someone else will start to warm your restless heart. So before you've forgotten what you left behind, I want you to know how far I have come. I still like to feel rooted. Find comfort beneath the outspread branches of 100-foot trees. But there's also the river, moving on to Virginia. And each time our dog circles back past me, I can see in her eyes that she wants me to follow, see just how far it can possibly take us. My parents have a cabin up on the New River, and there's some neighbors that we have up there. This woman's husband kept all of these goats, and so they had like this goat pasture, and she hated them. And so he went out of town one weekend while we were up there, and she hired this farmer to come and like take all the goats away. She just gave them away while he was gone, except one goat, and it escaped. And it lived for like 6 or 7 years, just sort of like up on the mountain on its own. And I kept thinking, like, it's going to get eaten by a bobcat or freeze to death. Like, something's going to happen to it. But it lived up there. You just sort of, kind of come driving in. Always. It was always there. It was amazing. I'll switch over and read a couple of these newer poems. Come back to that. So as I mentioned, sort of the summer after I sent that manuscript off, I really started working on some poems that are very specifically set in the landscape of the New River, and I wanted to read a couple of these. It's a series of elegies. This first one is called Regarding Innocence. Yes, the resurrected cicadas, and a linked pair of ill-fitting dragonflies rising astride, simultaneous, their ascent the seeming source of all exaltation. And regarding innocence, you are right. Right from the beginning. The end of sorrow, exactly where I felt once I'd drown. Yellow, like you said, the light around her, the light inside of which she sings, singing as if she had never lost a thing. I lost my paddle, preserver to the water. I lost my faith. The river shifting until every curve, every shoal remembered amidst the morning mist. Even now, something about the blue-black rocks smoothing the bottom. Then it's buried, vanished in the shifting silt. All the unheeded evidence that you have never, not once, left. grandmother like just put the fear of God into me about any snakes whatsoever. It's one of those like, you have those like, you know, fight or flight experiences. Like I could just see probably even a dead snake, I think, and like my adrenaline will just be like, go fast as you can in the other direction. So you know, the part of where this poem comes from is walking on some trails and coming across a snake after I'd already passed it, and then looked back and was like, oh my God. It scared me so much that I went out in the water rather than going back on the trails, like in my clothes, and walked around through the water and then got back on the path. Which was summer, thankfully. It had been winter. So it's called One Childhood Story. Seeing the deer prints, we followed. More specifically, you followed me. How much is not how it appears. I'm misremembering parts washed away, overgrown. When I looked back, you were still following. You were still there. In time, we came to a fenced pasture. The tall grass, what could be hidden there, made me nervous. You were patient. You allowed me time to get over my fear. We climbed through, pushed forward. We came to the muddied hem of the river. The trail running into the water, we swam. I'm remembering the obvious. The coolness of the water and the roughness of breath you said had less to do with depth or current than with angle. To agree was easy. I'm thinking of the hulking remains of that tree you called a stick. And I said, it was like that. But wasn't it also some childhood story whose point was that everything dead does not disappear? You did not answer. As when there were sounds nothing visible could account for, I did not pursue them. Isn't it all related? I should not forget the snakes, reddish-brown with green markings. When we passed safely, I thanked you. I stopped thinking what I was thinking, took your face in my hands and began to feel cooler, calm. The trail would end the way trails usually do. There are limited choices. We wake up and the one we love is there beside us, and then they are not. Just two more from New River Breakdown, and then one final poem from Jake Adam York's wonderful collection, Abide. We were talking when I first got here about this literary magazine called O. Henry, I like to think of it as literary, although they have one poem and one short story in it. Maybe it's not really literary. But they have a sister magazine here in Wilmington called Salt. This poem appeared in O. Henry. It's called Practical Gods. It's a poem that I've become more and more happy with the older it gets. I think I get like all these weird responses to the poems. Like my grandfather doesn't really like poetry. He doesn't get it whatsoever. For instance, I sent him the O. Henry magazine with this poem in it, and also at the same time I'd sent him a book about golf. He loves golf, by Jim Dodson. He's the publisher of O. Henry magazine. And then I went down and see him, and he said, Pirate, that's his nickname for me. Pirate, that was a pretty good poem. But this Jim Dodson fella, he can write. This is called Practical Gods. The evening sun reflects off our blue bird bath. The memory of afternoon rain as the day's end is marked on an empty wall. The leaky gutter still crying, inconsolable, like a mother who has just found or lost her only child. A fact I only mention because from our bed it always seems to be raining. There is no point to this. My wife does not want a child. The weather does not reflect unknown desire. If she were home, I would undress her in the cooling light, the tears from the willows glistening on her skin. But she is in a different season, and I am here alone. What would happen next, I will not say. You should know that the blue bird bath has the slightest of cracks and is always glazed with rain. Make what you want of it. There's only one robin that visits our yard, her breast its own sunset. At dusk, she hops from puddle to puddle, listening.